Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Brent Aiken, David Pruitt, and Russell Martin. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, David Pruitt.
Beautiful. Hello and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time listening to us, we want to welcome you and invite you over to our website, www.studentministryconversations.org, where you can find all of our previous episodes, show notes, blog articles, and much more. Our goal here is that you are inspired, encouraged, and that the things that you hear on this podcast would equip you to be a better student pastor for the church that you are serving in. All right, guys, let's get right into it. Today, I am very, very excited. I've got my friend Zach here. He is with Youth Leader Collective, and I'm going to let you talk all about that. It was kind of a cool thing. I have been going to refuel retreats through Leader Treks. You guys in a previous episode got to meet Doug, incredible friend and mentor in my life, and ended up meeting Zach in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. We got to talking and hearing about his ministry and what he does. And so I just really wanted to take the time this morning to highlight your ministry. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family and ministry, and how all this stuff got started.
Thanks, David. Honored to sit with you this morning and just talk youth ministry. And got to meet you at Refuel. I live not too far down the road, about a couple hours down the road in Tennessee, in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've lived here my whole life. Married, my wife April. We've been married for 20 years. Known each other since middle school. We have two boys. We have a freshman who's at UT Chattanooga here in town, and then we have a 13-year-old Eli who's in 7th grade. My wife's a high school teacher. She teaches at the same school that both my boys went through as a K-12 school. We all right now are all within about a 3-block radius. My office is at a church downtown, which is basically right in the middle of the UT Chattanooga campus, and then the high school she teaches at is right across the street. So we're all right in the middle of the heart of Chattanooga, and so we love this city and have loved living here our entire lives. I did youth ministry for about 16 years, and then I came on with a ministry that I serve with now about 7 years ago.
Awesome, man. So you are with the Youth Leader Collective, yeah? So how did that come about?
That's it, yeah. And so Youth Leader Collective, it's a ministry. It's changed names, but it's a ministry that's been around for coming up on 30 years. And when I was a youth pastor, it was at one time called the Youth Network. And when I was a youth pastor, our executive director, who's now, his name's Tony Souter, he's been serving youth pastors, as I said, for 30 years. He was is a mentor of mine when I served in youth ministry. And he had these networks that met in the area, and I benefited from that, and was just a resource to me. And about 8 years ago, I started meeting with him just for some wisdom, trying to navigate hard seasons in youth ministry, as we all experience, and just needed someone to kind of walk me through that season. And he had actually developed another ministry called the Pray For Me campaign that took him away from serving youth pastors, and I can talk a little bit more about what we do, took him away from serving youth leaders, and that enabled me to really step away from the church role I had into the role I have now, serving youth pastors. And so that's been just a joy. And so he now serves as the executive director of our larger ministry, which is called 100 Years, and which has underneath it Youth Leader Collective and the Pray For Me campaign. And Pray For Me campaign is a national ministry which is creating intergenerational relationships in churches. And I'm the director of Youth Leader Collective that focuses on connecting, coaching, and caring for youth leaders. And I tell people my favorite thing to do is to just sit across the table from a youth leader, to be a safe place for them, to be an encouragement to them. You know this, David, in ministry, a lot of times it can be isolating. It can be very, it can just be hard at times. There's so much pressure and expectations on us in
Yeah,
ministry that we don't have any outlets to talk about it. And a lot of people don't understand what we're walking through. And so my favorite thing to do is to sit across the table from a youth pastor, share coffee or a meal with, and just say, "Hey, let's talk about life. Let's not just talk about your numbers on Wednesday night, but let's talk about how's your family doing, how your kids doing, how's your personal walk with Jesus doing, and let's talk
yeah.
about those things because
For
a
sure.
lot of people aren't
Man, I
asking those
really appreciate
questions."
that. Um, we always get the conversation, especially I'm coming up on, well, I'm on my 20th year in student ministry. And, you start getting those questions like, hey, what's next for you? Do you want to be a senior pastor? Do you
Mm.
want to, and one of the things that I've long considered since talking to Doug was being in some kind of role, like what you guys do to encourage the next generation of student pastors. That's a big part of why we have this podcast, is to have an open
Mm.
conversation with youth leaders and pastors, and just have open conversations about what youth ministry is, and sometimes what youth ministry isn't, sometimes to dispel some of those things as well, talk about the business of, side of it too, because that's a big part that, um, I see, especially in my conversations with uh, newer youth leaders, is they have a really good biblical base and they have a huge heart for students, but they have no idea how to have a conversation with a parent, or um, how to balance a budget and different things like that. And so, being able to have a resource like what you guys are doing, I think it's vital. And it's sad to me too that there are so many youth pastors in the world that just don't know resources like this exist. And so, I really, that was a big reason why I wanted to get you on, is to talk about what you
Mm.
do, and some different practical things too. And so, man, if nothing else, I do want to say thank you so much for what you do and what you provide and offer, because it is very, very important, in the life of a big youth pastor.
Well, I appreciate that, Dave. I appreciate the opportunity. And I mean, our heartbeat is relationships. I mean, that's the heartbeat of what you do in student ministry, and being a pastor to students and families, and serving them as relationships. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, we've never had more content available in the history of Christendom. And so if 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 you want to talk curriculum, if you want to talk leadership, if you want to talk, we can talk about that. I'd love to point you to some really great stuff. Um, but I see my role as coming alongside, and we our ministry, we offer conferences. We do a what we have in August of every year. We have the Southeast Youth Leader Conference. We have 350 youth leaders at our conference just this past month. Doug Franklin was one of those guys that was pouring into youth pastors, and just an incredible thing. We do conferences, we do cohorts, those kind of things. But I tell people the lifeblood of what we do is our area networks and just sitting across the table. It's that being those relationships, and you know, I think a lot of times the felt need for a youth pastor is going to be the those external pressures of how do I get more students, or how do I build my volunteer team, or all those things. But I love to just be that, help be the listening ear, create the relationships, and
Yeah,
deal with some of those
for
more
sure.
important issues, which I think
So,
are our personal
would you
walk with the
mind
Lord and
walking
things
us
in
through the
life.
process? Say I'm a new youth leader, and or really just any youth leader, and I hear about, what you guys are doing. What's the
Yeah.
process of, you know, getting across the table with you?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's great, and there's never any one way. A lot of times, just because the our collective's been so involved in our area, and there's a couple different ways. One, if you're in our area, it's usually me being intentional, reaching out, saying, "Hey, one, I'd love to just grab coffee with you, and just to get to know your story." And a lot of times, people have their arms out because they think, "Uh-oh, what's the agenda here? What do you want from me?" And I let people know up front, we don't want anything from you. We want something for you. and then just to get to know their story and just getting to know what we can do to serve them, and then get them connected with other youth pastors. So we have 4 area networks, we now call them collectives. We have 2 in North Georgia, 2 in Chattanooga, and try to get them connected with other youth pastors. And I tell people this is something that you're going to benefit from just being around other youth pastors, being able to get encouraged, being able to that, but also something you add by being in the room. You have a whole lifetime of experience, ministry, story, value that you add from being in the room. We pray together, we encourage together. Those are so vital. Those monthly gatherings that we have together. And so getting them connected. If someone is not in Chattanooga, I had a Zoom call yesterday with a youth pastor who's new to an area and he wants to be a part of this. I love
Yeah.
walking through youth pastors saying, hey, how do I start something new? And I tell people start small and have the long view of it. Okay, I'm not going to start a monthly network with 15 youth pastors tomorrow, but just start small of one, getting to know the area, getting to know what we call the gatekeepers. Who's the David Pruitts who've been in youth ministry for 20 years in my area, and say, hey, I'd love to get to know you, and I'd love to get to know how you've been serving and get to know what that looks like. And then again, building relationships just one at a time, before you start
Man, that's
having
huge. And
these
I was glad
monthly
that you
gatherings with
also hit on
15,
that because,
15 guys.
for the people who are maybe farther away from y'all's area, Tennessee, Georgia area, getting connected to through like a Zoom call,
Mm-hmm.
is huge. I mean, I'll be completely honest. I would totally get connected with you guys, for sure. There's a lot of awesome resources, and tell us a little bit more, also about that conference you were talking about as well. Um, I don't think there's enough conferences we can go to in a year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And you make a good point there. There's a lot of great conferences we point people to. Just here in Chattanooga, we have Conclave, which is something that the Baptist churches in the Southeast put on, and we point people to that. There's Youth Pastor Summit that Student Leadership University puts on. There's the Orange Conference. There's a lot of great conferences, and we'll encourage people to go to them. We were trying to look at, okay, what's something that we can do that's different that will really encourage not just youth pastors, but all youth leaders. So we do a Saturday conference that
Yeah.
enables not just those full-time youth pastors to go, but also those part-time, the volunteer, those bivocational youth
Mhm.
leaders, and also so that a David Pruitt could bring their team. And we do it at the first part of the school year, kind of leading in, so they can come and get ready for the school year. And so this year we had Brent Crow from who's the with Student Leadership University. He led our main session, and then from there, we had 3 breakout sessions with 22 different breakouts offered over the day on everything from girls ministry to, Doug Franklin was talking about developing volunteers. We just had a whole host of breakouts, and we charged $35 it ended up being $42 if you don't get the early bird for the whole day. And we feed them breakfast,
Man.
feed them lunch, just really try to bless youth
Man, and that's
leaders
a really good
for the
price
whole
too.
day.
Because I
And
mean, I
it's just
think,
a really, really
I see
great
so
day.
many youth ministries that really don't have a big budget to be able to do something like this, and so a lot of us pull out of our own pockets and stuff. And at 35 early bird, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's covering your meals the way like, I had a conversation with our parent team, just a couple of weeks
Oh
ago when
yeah,
we were getting ready
yeah,
for a mission trip next month. And one of the things that they're asking is how much money they needed for meals, and I was like, with inflation, we're at a point where you pretty much have to plan for $15 a meal. And so at that, man, that covers your breakfast and lunch. You know what I mean? And so,
yeah.
man, that's a really, really good price. And for what it's worth, guys, he
It
didn't
does.
pay
Yeah,
me to plug anything that he's doing with all these. I just think that's awesome. I've been the guy who paid
yeah.
probably a little too much for a conference, but I've also been the guy that went to free ones and the cheaper ones too. And I found, um, personally, being able to go to like a refuel retreat or some of these somewhat smaller ones have been the ones that I came out with the most information, and mostly it's because you get the smaller the conference, the more you get to network with other youth pastors. And that's really, to me, the biggest benefit than anything is making new friends and getting to pick their
Hmm.
brains about things that have worked and things that haven't worked. And, some of my closest friends have come from conferences, especially Refuel for me. So it's been really cool so any chance I get to hear about a conference, I definitely want to
Yeah.
let everyone know about those, because man, there's some fantastic ones out there, and would love to definitely check out y'all's sometime soon.
Well, and David, you mentioned refuel. I could go on and on. I went. That was my second refuel. So like you, it was my second refuel. I love Doug. I love everything Leader Treks does. They're one of the main ministries that I'm gonna push people to, because I love his heart for discipleship. We have him coming back in February to do discipleship, talk about discipleship with our youth leaders over lunch, and then the next day we have a cohort that's we're starting next year. He's going to spend just about like a 9 to 3 with like 10 to
Yeah,
12 youth pastors. I just think what a gift it's going to be for those younger youth pastors. So Doug is just, yeah, he's the same way. He's been just a mentor and an incredible
for sure,
gift.
man. Um, so what? Think of how to phrase this question. Um, so say you and I are sitting across the table virtually here, but sitting across the table, what are maybe two or three things that
Mhm.
you typically like starting a session? Like obviously there's the relationship building, getting to know each other and stuff like that, but what are some things that people can expect from being able to sit across the table from you or any of your team?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it is a lot of relationship building. It's a lot of, I like to ask questions like, tell me 3 things that have shaped, like three. One of the questions a lot of times I'll ask people is, what are 3 things that have happened in your life that have shaped you, that made you the leader that you are today? Another question I love is that I like to find out where people are just even in their own self awareness. Um, tell me how God's made you, wired you, spiritual gifts, those kinds of things, and then their awareness of the people that they're on their team with. I like to ask about, what are the pain points, the challenges that they are, if they're new to ministry or not. Um, and a lot of times I've learned as I walk with people, the first time I meet with them, everything's great in ministry. Everything's going well. Everything, relationships with staff is good. And then that second, third, fourth time I'm meeting with them, they start to kind of open up about, what, I am struggling with this relationship, or I'm having this challenge on staff, or I'm having a hard time with these parents, or these kinds of things. So um, just being intentional with certain questions, like you I mentioned earlier about what are the pain points, what are the challenges, or some of those questions that I like to ask. I actually have
Cool.
a document I have with like actually it's 100
Dude,
questions
that's
that I'll
awesome.
sometimes
That's
get
really
to
cool. I like
use
having
those. Mhm.
those conversations personally, but I really like what you said there with the pain
Mhm.
points. I think that's a really good way of phrasing it too, because a lot of times we don't
Mhm.
sometimes things seem so bad that we don't even know how to structure or even where to start with our issues. And, whether it be inside the student ministry specifically, or adapting to expectations. That's something we talked about a little bit earlier. Um, that can be one of the most difficult circumstances to navigate, because it
Mm.
can be so overwhelming, especially for a student pastor who struggles with people pleasing, which is me. It can be really difficult. So navigating expectations
Yeah, same.
is a huge pain point that I see in a lot of student pastors that I get to talk to, including myself. And so, man, I like that language of using that. I think gonna have to use that moving forward, for
Mm.
sure. Um, Talking about that, didn't
Yeah,
necessarily mean to go into this, but I think it's an interesting
that's
topic
good.
to talk about. How do you deal with the weight of expectations? whether that be from parents or leadership at the church.
Mm. Uh, mm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. You said at one
Yeah,
time,
I don't
how
know
do
if
you
that's the
deal with
best
the
way to put
weight
it.
of expectations?
Mhm.
Is that what the question was? Yeah. Yeah. Weight of expectations. Yeah. No, no, no. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think one, just kind of helping them see, let me think through that, the weight of expectations. Um, yeah. So helping them see, okay, so they got all these internal pressures, and then they got the pressures of, and everybody has different pressures, the expectations, whether it's the parents, the students, the pastor, the deacon, the little old lady on the front row, whoever it is. There's all these different expectations. I remember Doug saying one time, and you've probably heard him say it, is kind of being ready when someone comes up to you and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" Um, Being ready with a response of, a lot of times what they're thinking,
Mhm.
what they're asking is, how many kids did you have on Wednesday night? Or how many kids did you have at D now or at camp? That's what they want to hear. But you being ready with a response of, hey, you know what? We had three visitors. Being ready with a positive thing. We had three visitors that showed up at student ministry, and then they've come back the last 3 weeks. Um, or we baptized two kids last week. Or I went to the schools last week, and two kids came from FCA that I visited with. Just being ready with these positive stories that lets people know it's not just about, oh, we had this X number of kids show up for an event, which is important, but being ready with these positive things. Um, and and it's kind of like changing the culture from the inside out, and letting people
Mm.
know it's what should their expectations be, what should their
It's
pressures,
a good point.
what should
So you're
they be thinking are the
referencing
right expectations as
Doug's
well.
3330 principle. I don't know if that's exactly what he calls it, but it's something. Basically, it's be ready with a 30-second response. And what I love is
Yeah,
the way that Doug structures it.
yeah,
Is he always starts with the vision, and but before that he says a little phrase that I think is the most disarming thing, because a lot of times when they come to you, it's not
mm,
always, hey, tell me about what's good. Sometimes it's really like, I'm gonna trip him up, like, and then you can just see it in their eye, you know. And so he always starts with a 3-word phrase that
yeah,
is got to be the most
yeah,
disarming thing I've ever heard in ministry. It's as you know. And I was like, man, you could do a whole seminar on as you know.
mm,
But I remember the first time
mm,
he told me that, and I asked him, you say as you know, but what if they don't? Like, what if they don't
yeah,
know? He was like, but that's the key. If they don't know, they're automatically put in a position where it's like, oh, I'm supposed to know the vision and mission of our youth ministry, and I don't. And so now all of a sudden, he was like, it's not really trying to take the power, but you're kind of like, in a sense, you're
yeah,
disarming them. And now you guys are back on level playing ground together, and you can state the mission. You can talk and then go into, Wednesday night we had 2 or 3 guests, or whatever the situation might be. Like for us, my 30-second response has been, basically, as you know, the mission of our student ministry is to meet students where they are. That's not exactly the full thing, but I'm trying to be somewhat short so we can get back to you. um, but basically it's engaging students where they are. In doing so, we had the
oh, you're good.
opportunity, a couple Wednesday nights ago, where two of our new students who had been coming for 2 weeks actually accepted Christ, and it was a really cool opportunity to see the light just come on, and they've
Mm,
both of them have wanted to get involved in the things that we're doing. So we've got a youth led service coming up in November. We'd love for you to be a part of that, and if you would like to help, I mean, it's just different things like that. It's like it went from Wednesday night, we had 2 students accept Christ that were brand new. They have signed up for our youth led service. Now we're also talking the future. in November, we're having a youth led service, and we not only would love for you to be there, we'd love to see how you can get involved in helping us run the service in some way. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, okay, so this is what's going on, but this is also where we're headed. You want to be a part?
That's awesome.
Kind of thing. And so it's very much flips the script. And then the other
Yeah.
side, so you have your 30-second response, you have your 3-minute response where you can actually sit there and talk a little bit, have a little bit more of a conversation, and then the 30-minute response of let's have a seat, let's hang out over coffee and talk about student ministry in more detail and how you can plug in, always with the heart of how can we plug you in, whatever that might be. How can we use your passions? How can we use your gifts? And it's an awesome way to gain more volunteers in your ministry. I think that's one of the best principles I think I've ever heard.
Mm. No, I love it too. I agree. I think it's fantastic, and I forgot that it was called the 3330. But now that you say
Yeah,
that,
for sure.
it reminds me of that, and it is
Um,
it is fantastic.
you- yeah,
Yeah. Something uh, I was just going to say something else that thinking of, like, even as you mentioned earlier, the weight and pressures and expectations. I was thinking about, like, what about like the internal, well, or like staff pressures, or maybe pressures that are coming, or expectations from pastors or team leaders. This is something I've just learned and heard from others as well, is kind of responding to, if you're getting those expectations from pastors, or you're feeling a weight of expectation, is to go to your or any kind of pain point, go to your pastor um, and say, hey, how can I help you do your job better? How can I help you? How can I serve you in a way that makes you look better? And so you kind of turn, again, it's changing the culture, it's turning things around. I remember hearing a guy one time said, don't ask someone to push your wheelbarrow up the hill until you're willing to push theirs up the hill. And it, and sometimes it feels counterintuitive to do that. You feel like, okay, the pastor's supposed to be mentoring me, they're supposed to be doing these things for me, but going to your pastor and saying, hey, how can I help you do your job better? And a lot of times it will kind of de-arm them in a way where
that's
you
huge.
won't feel as many pressures and
Just thinking about that
expectations.
too. Having that conversation with your pastor, and of course you want to do it in a loving and gracious way that doesn't make it sound like you're um,
Mm,
saying, hey, you're failing, how can I do your that kind of thing, but like in a sense it says, hey, we're a team and we're very much in this together. How can I help? And in that sense too, I could see it being very much kind
yeah.
of like we were talking just a little bit ago. I could see that being a deal where they do then turn around and say, well, you're doing a lot to help me. How can I help you? And then it becomes conversational and more collaborative. So many times I see whole ministries that are doing great, but they're not doing great together. And so you have your staff meeting, and it's like, well, the children's ministry is doing this, and the youth ministry is doing this, and the adult leaders or
Mm,
the adult team is doing this, and our discipleship groups are doing this. And when it's all turned around, you start to realize it's a report of, well, we're doing this, and you're doing this, and hey, we need to book the fellowship hall for this, and instead, I could see that flipping into a situation where now we're talking about this is what we're doing together, and this is how we can get all. That's one of the beautiful things that I've seen in our church over the last couple of years is instead of saying this is individual reports, it's all right, this is what we have going on, how can all of us help, where can we plug each other in, um, to where everyone is part of everyone's ministry in some way, form, or
mm.
fashion. I think that becomes vital to establishing unity across all the ministries in our church. So I think that's a great way to start that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said there about Just that
It's
team,
got to
it
be that
creates
way.
that
So many
team
times I
mindset,
feel
that team
like,
mentality.
and
That's
even
good.
in my church, there was a long time. I'm in year 9 as of tomorrow. Looking at the calendar, yeah. But I remember when I got here, I want to say
Awesome.
it was the first couple of days. It was automatically like, okay, so you're pit against this person, and I remember thinking, what did I get myself into? There was a lot of that, and it was
Mhm.
like, okay, well, children's ministry is doing this,
Yeah.
hooray! Now tell us how the youth ministry won this week, and it was like it felt like a tug of war, and it was like I there were so many times I'd come home to my wife and I'm like, man, it just feels like we're competing with each other, and church should never be that way. Like we're
Right.
already we're already competing with other churches, which also shouldn't be a thing. But there's
Yeah.
already that expectation of, well, the Baptist church across the street has this many students. How many do you have? Or they did this many events. How many have you done? And stuff like that. But when you're also competing with
Hmm.
ministries inside your own church, man, that is just, it can be brutal at times. And being able to slowly shift that culture away from that has been one of the most refreshing things in our church. Um, and I think what you said there, especially of like, how can I help you
Mm.
roll the barrel uphill kind of thing, like that's huge. And I really wish that was a question I would have asked early on. Um, a lot of
Yeah.
times it came into for my specific situation was um, I was just seeing balls get dropped, and so I was just picking them up, and it wasn't a situation where it was like, how can I help you? It was just stepping in and seeing a need and just getting it done. But we didn't necessarily do it together, and there wasn't a whole lot of conversation, and so that's definitely something that I think could have avoided some pitfalls here,
Mm.
had I had that conversation with our senior pastor or other staff members.
That's awesome. Yeah. I,
Man,
I
it's
wish I had
incredible
known
the
that
things
as
that we
my
can
when I was
learn.
younger
And,
myself.
what's
So
funny is
yeah.
like just as you said that, I was like, that's so basic. If
Oh,
you
no
think
doubt.
about it, like it really should be like youth ministry 101. Help each
Right.
other. Ask how you can help. And we do that, but we don't do that at the
Hmm.
same time. And it should be something that's just second nature, but sometimes
Mm.
we get so bogged down in the details that we forget the simple stuff. So Um,
For
I guess
sure.
my last question,
Absolutely.
and I could talk to you forever, man. You're like one of the you're such a good listener too.
Yeah.
But
Oh, same. Mm.
what
Mm.
what kind of
Yeah.
advice would you give to a youth pastor? I mean, we've already kind of talked about this with expectation and stuff, but what kind of advice would you give a youth pastor who might be struggling, whether it's expectation or insecurity or whatever it might be? What kind of advice would you give in that moment? Say you've already established a relationship.
Yeah. I would. One, I think having multiple relationships around you, whether do they, I would ask, do they have a mentor? Do they have someone that is investing in them? Uh, Whether you call them a mentor, coach, someone that's further along in their life that is investing in them, and then do they have other people that are in the same age and stage of them, that maybe other youth ministers that are kind of walking alongside with them. I could tell just a beautiful story real quick. I'll tell of a network that took place of one of our gatherings. This was about 3 or 4 years ago. Uh, I saw the beauty of both pain and joy take place. We had two guys. One guy was coming and he was celebrating one of the highlights of his ministry where he was being installed. He had just finished his denominations, um, all the requirements to be installed as a pastor. And he was coming, and that day we were all celebrating that, and several people were going to go to his installation that following Sunday. On that same day, another youth pastor who everyone had gotten to know, was actually being let go from his church following that meeting. And he knew he was walking into that. And so the tension that we felt in that moment of everyone surrounding both the joy and then surrounding the other guy in his pain, was, and the prayers that took place and the tears of both joy and pain. And I think that if someone is walking through, no matter what they're walking through, we experience both joy and pain in ministry. If you don't have other people to walk through it with you, and I was able, for the guy who was walking through the hard season, I was able to kind of serve as a mentor to him. He's much younger in ministry, but if you don't have both, I think someone to reach out to and other people to walk alongside with you, I think that it's going to be really, really hard.
Man, that's so good. Like,
and so that'd be one of the first things.
And what a way to navigate that, man. I feel like that had to be pretty spirit led in that moment. Like, man, how do we help this guy who is going through tremendous pain while also celebrating another guy, because both situations matter, and having that in the same room, like, wow, must have been a really powerful moment.
Yeah. It was powerful, and I had nothing to do with it. I just sat there and watched the other youth pastors just love on both of them in that moment. And the Spirit led one of our youth leaders. She began to pray for one of them, and it just was a powerful moment. And I just watched it. I mean, I tell people what makes Youth Leader Collective special is not me in any way, shape, or form. It's you. I mean, the wisdom is the collective power of the people, and God working through each of you. So, yeah.
What's the best way to get in contact with you guys? Is it like send an email through your website kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely can. Youthleadercollective.com is one easy way to get in touch with us. My contact, my phone, and my email are on there. We have a whole host of resources on there that we put on there. But you can, Zach, Z-A-C-H, at youthleadercollective.com is a way you can email me. I'd love if if I could just be a listening ear, do a Zoom call, do a phone call. If you're interested in starting a network up in your area, or you just need somebody to talk about what's going on in your church, I'd love to do that, and happy to do that with anyone. So you can do that, and then we're on all the social media.
Awesome.
Instagram,
Man, I
Facebook,
really
Twitter,
appreciate your
Youth Leader
time.
Collective.
And I would love to definitely have you back again to talk more specific things. Man, just an incredible blessing to have you. To hear about the ministry that you guys are doing is incredible. And definitely encourage everyone who's listening to take the time, check out Youth Leader Collective, ask questions, and come together. That's the biggest thing is, as we said today, come together and bring both your joys and your pains, and grow together. I say it all the time. We've got a phrase here in Snyder with a couple of us youth pastors is we're better together. And ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to is understanding that we preach all the time that none of us are alone, but yet we isolate ourselves and become alone real quick. And so remember that there are a whole lot of people who want to pour into your life. And if you're in that place of struggling, know that you're not alone, and that there are people like Zach who are waiting for the opportunity to speak into your life if you'll let them. So all the shameless plug I can give you guys for sure. So let's wrap up. Of course, man. Thank you guys so much for listening. We would be so honored if you guys would share our podcast with your youth pastor friends on social media, or tag specific episodes that really stood out to you on your favorite platform by using @TalkStudentMen. Finally, if you would like to be on the show in the future, please reach out to us on social media or send us an email to podcast@studentministryconversations.org, and we would love to set up a time for you to join us. Have a great week, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Thank you so much, Zach.